sources close to the team today told us that the Jazz are targeting multiple point guards in the NBA draft, and specifically Amen Thompson and Scoot Henderson, and they are willing to give up significant draft assets to do that. Obviously, the Jazz have the 9th pick in the first round right now, but we've been working on this story for the better part of a week because it doesn't seem in a rebuild that you would sit at number 9 and hang on to all your picks. That doesn't seem like the practical application of a rebuild. But what you would do is in this draft aggressively pursue one of your biggest needs. And in my opinion, their two biggest needs are power forward and point guard. And in this draft, I don't think there's any doubt. And I almost think it's universal that when you look at the point guard prospects in this draft, the workouts that Scoot Henderson has had the last 10 days have been described to me as spectacular. His body has grown. He has built his body. His physique is chiseled. His jump shot, he has tweaked his release. His jump shot looks really clean. He is saying all the right things. The NBA is quickly beginning to fall in love with Scoot Henderson at that 2nd pick. And what that does for Charlotte is that builds a hell of a lot of equity in that 2nd pick. And I think when you look at the Utah Jazz, I think Scoot Henderson and Amen Thompson are the two. And I think that they are willing to give up multiple first-round picks and a later-round pick to get that done. And I don't know specifically that the Jazz would be willing to give up a lot of future draft capital. I think they'd be willing to give up multiple picks in this first round of this draft to get up to number 2 to get the point guard that they want. And I think if they get to number 2, obviously they are targeting Scoot Henderson, because if you do some simple math here, I don't think you need to go past 4 to get Amen Thompson. But our sources today that we talked to said that the Jazz are targeting number 2. And if they're not able to get number 2, I think they would go to number 4. And I think, Jake, it makes a lot of sense that when you have the assets that they have and you have the timeline that we know that Danny Ainge and the Jazz are working on, this is the draft to be aggressive in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, this is why you brought Danny Ainge in. I think Danny Ainge is an operator, and my expectation for Danny Ainge is to be very productive in this draft. And that could be a number of different things. It could be trading up to get Scoot. It could be trading up to get, Amen Thompson. Like there are many different ways that you could go here. But to me, I think this whole conversation around needing a point guard, because that's what I put as the top priority. Yes, power forward is really important, but I think with where the Jazz are at right now, the players you have on your roster, you need someone to initiate that offense. You need someone to reliably bring the ball up and give your offense some pace, because in watching this team last year, their biggest problem was inconsistency with how quickly they played the game. One half, you'd get a nice quick pace, you'd be into your offense, and a lot of times you'd get out in transition and you'd be moving the ball well. On another, in the second half, a lot of times you'd be working the ball really slowly up the floor, and you would just be kind of two different teams in that way. And so to me, I would love to see Danny Ainge move up and get Scoot. Obviously that's a win-win. I mean, if you move up in the draft to get a guy like Scoot, and let's say Scoot, for whatever reason, not that I think he would, but let's say that he was a bust somehow. Well, no one's going to blame you for that. That's a reliable win-win pick. So for me, I would prioritize point guard and then work on power forward later in this draft. But absolutely, I think if you were to go and get Scoot, if you were to go and get Thompson, there are great options in this draft. But I think no matter what, if you're a Jazz fan, you can't get away from the idea that Colin Sexton hasn't quite worked out and reached the ceiling you would have liked for him to reach. Because if he had worked out the way you wanted him to, if he had stayed healthy, not picked up the injury, you wouldn't be in this position. But frankly, Colin Sexton, in my opinion, is more of a guy that's going to be coming off the bench behind whoever you pick up in this draft. I think he is a solid, I'm not talking about young guy coming off the bench now. I'm talking about bring him in the game, 20-minute-a-night contributor, tenacious on defense, really gives you quality minutes behind whoever that guy is you draft.
But I also think Colin Sexton can be your Jordan Clarkson replacement. I think he can be that guy who can flame on. He can come in and run an offense. He can score for you. Because the thing that excites me about Colin Sexton is his ability to attack the basket. This league is rapidly turning into a fast-paced league where free throws determine games. Mm-hmm. And I think when you look at the way that the Denver Nuggets control the pace of their game, you look at the way, frankly, if we look at the top of the conference, You always have teams, whether it's the Phoenix Suns, you had 3 operators on that team this year that knew how to get to the free throw line. You look at the Golden State Warriors, the LA Lakers. The LA Lakers were dominant at the free throw line. That's what you have to build. You have to build a team that can play at pace, shoot the 3, and get to the free throw line. Colin Sexton can be that player. And I that's why I am not a proponent of trading him. I also think he's coming off of a significant injury. You knew this was going to be a touch and go year, a spotty year for him. When he played, he showed you things. Now, it took some time to get him into the system, frankly, with Will Hardy. But once Colin got going a little bit, you saw flashes of what he could be. That to me means, hey, let him be your 6th man almost, your scorer off the bench. And then if he earns that job, Grady earns that job, that should be your biggest problem, that Colin Sexton's playing too well and he needs to start. Hey, that's cool, man. We'd all love to have that problem.
Do you think, you said something there about Jordan Clarkson, and I know we get this all the time from Jazz fans. Do you think as a Jazz fan, it's time to start putting him in the past? Because I think a lot of Jazz fans are reticent to do that. A lot of Jazz fans are like, yeah, he is technically off of our roster right now, but they're going to re-sign him.
Yes.
I think a lot of Jazz fans want to live in that reality. And I'm not so sure that you should be living in that reality. In fact, I would tell you not to be living in that reality. I would be telling you that the draft is the number 1 priority. And in my opinion, the Jazz should behave as though Jordan Clarkson is not going to be on this team. And if
he's not going to be on this team.
And if he wanted to take a hometown discount, cool, whatever, maybe that works out. But I agree with that. I think that he wants to play for a championship. And to me, Jazz fans need to let Jordan Clarkson go emotionally and mentally because he's already gone.
Yeah. I think if you look at this draft, I think you have to be willing, if you're the Utah Jazz and you have an opportunity at the 2nd or the 4th, I think you have to be willing to trade your picks. I think you have to be willing to look at your Minnesota pick. I think you have to be willing to look at your Philadelphia pick. I think you have to be willing, to look at that Lakers pick, in 2028, 2027, the Lakers first round pick, right? Protected top 4. You have to be willing to look at picks down the road to put yourself in a position. And this is, hey, the conversation I had today was very much that. The Jazz are willing to be aggressive because they've identified, and it was said to me, Scoot Henderson and Amen Thompson are the 2 guys that they've identified that, hey, these are the guys that fit in our system. There's a lot of belief that Amen Thompson is much more mature than his age and his experience, and that his learning curve, because of his skill set that's already in place, makes him a unique guy who can play in this league at an early stage in his career.
Yeah.
Because I think most of us who have followed this team and followed this rebuild understand the Jazz are not looking for a 10-year rebuild. They're looking for a 2 to 3 year rebuild. They're looking to be a championship caliber club, not this year, not next year, but that year after that, when you're talking about 2026 as a year where this team believes that it should be competing for an NBA championship. You're going to see them build a roster this year that puts them solidly into the playoffs. I think next year, you're going to need to leave some room for question marks. How much are we developing? Because I also think, what are you going to do to replace Fizdale? Because I think when you look at this roster, the fact that Walker Kessler is, A, going to represent the United States at the Worlds, the fact that he became one of the best rim runners in this league in the second half of the year last year, and the fact that you can see him developing offensively right before your eyes in the middle of games. This is a guy now, his development becomes a priority. So you love that he's going to the Worlds, right? You have nothing to lose there. You have an absolute foundational piece in Lauri Markkanen. What you have to do now is figure out, hey, is Ochai Agbaji a starter? Is this a guy that we can plug in at a 2-3 and call it good? I don't know. We need to figure that out, right? Is Lauri Markkanen a 3 or a 4, right? I don't think you need to be locked in necessarily to positions, but is Ochai Agbaji one of your 5 best players? Or is he a guy that you're going to make a starter? Is Walker Kessler, is this group of guys, and specifically those 3, because I think Walker for sure, Lauri Markkanen, a bit of a question mark on, is he one of your best players the year that you're pushing to win a championship? I think that's a big question.
Yeah.
I can't believe that we get another year of massive growth out of Lauri Markkanen, because I don't even know what kind of player he would be at that point. But those questions have been answered by this club already. They're looking at this draft from what our sources close to the team are telling us. They're looking at this draft as an opportunity to take a step forward in time, to kind of bend that growth curve. They've identified Scoot Henderson and Amen Thompson as two guys they really like.
Facts.
And I think when you look at the potential of this team, to win, man, I'm telling you, I would give up the Laker pick. I would give up the Philadelphia pick. I want 2 first-round picks in this draft.
Yeah.
That's what I think this Jazz team needs, to pick 2 players in this first round. Everything else after that's gravy. 2 players in this first round really pushes you forward. And I love Scoot Henderson. You guys know we have talked about him ad nauseum on this show.
Yeah.
But, man, I'm telling you, Amen Thompson is a stud.
Oh, and those are 2 players in Scoot and Ammon that, they are not, these long-term, give them 4 seasons to figure out if they can be a starter guys. I mean, I am a big proponent, no matter how good you are, outside of talents like LeBron James or the, Hall of Fame level guys right out of the draft. 99% of players, you got to give them a season first. Like, you just give them a season to go and do whatever they're going to do on your team. That's just the starting point. But I think that second year, and it kind of lines up with what you were saying, where, hey, 3 drafts from now, you'd hope in this process to be competing for a championship.
Yes.
So if you were to draft Scoot, let's say this year, this coming season is a whatever season. He's going to come out, he's going to ball out, probably going to contend for Rookie of the Year type stuff. With Victor, absolutely. And that would be great for the Jazz. That would bring a ton of notoriety, a ton of attention. Awesome. But expectation-wise, we need to remember that it's still his first year in the league. That second year is when I would expect him to flourish, and I would expect him to become the guy that you expected him to be when you drafted him. And I think the beautiful part about that is it lines right up with your rebuild process, with your timeline, with when you want to start contending. Like, this coming season, would not be surprised if you were, a 6th seed in the Western Conference. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah,
not at all.
Totally agree. Jet Wayman says point guard is definitely a top priority in my opinion. I think it is the priority.
Yeah.
Because I don't think in this league anymore, there are no coincidences. I mean, you look at what Jamal Murray meant to the Denver Nuggets. It's not a coincidence. You look at Steph Curry and what he means to Golden State. It's not a coincidence.
Absolutely.
You get somebody like D'Angelo Russell to settle down that offense. It's not a coincidence what the Lakers rise, right? You look at the things that determine win and loss in this league. And I think you have to have somebody. You look at Chris Paul for the Suns, what he used to be, what he's not anymore. Their success with Chris Paul was also their failure because of Chris Paul. The point guard is non-negotiable in this league.
Yeah.
And when you have a guy like Amen Thompson, dude, man, I am just a huge fan. And I like Thompson. If I were the Jazz, I would be targeting him because I think when you see that one, the Rockets have the 4th pick. I don't know that they are invested in adding another young player to that team. I think when you brought in Ime Udoka and you said we want to win, I think you're changing that philosophy.
Absolutely.
And I think that if you can make a trade and maybe you get into the 4th spot. If you get into the 4th spot, I mean, the world's your oyster at that point. So I think you're talking about a franchise in Charlotte that's a lot less pliable than the Houston Rockets, because I think and I might be one of the few, I think there's a lot of questions around LaMelo Ball as a true feature point guard. That does not mean that he can't be a floor general. He's got wonderful vision. He's an excellent passer. But that kid's a scorer. That kid is an absolute wrecking machine. And I think if you put a Scoot Henderson next to him, dude,
Yeah.
that's going to be a 1-2 combination for a decade, depending on how healthy they are.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's a 1-2 combination you can believe in.
Yep.
Now,
No,
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that's why I like Scoot. That's why I like this draft a lot. That's why I think you need to be aggressive because again, you can just see like the issue I had with Colin Sexton is I don't think he's that coachable. I think Colin Sexton's a tough guy to coach. I think he's a firecracker of a player and you love that.
I would agree with that.
And you hate that. Like it was an infamous thing on the bench when Will Hardy was chewing his ass out for a dumb play that he had made, right? Like they had and kudos to the Jazz in the building, right? To at that time AT&T Sportsnet, right? Like had a camera
right?
on them on the bench, like great job, caught that moment. And it's like, hey man, like you got to be more coachable than that. And that's why I say like I look at Colin Sexton and I say, hey, your time in Cleveland was cool. You got the pass because you were a young guy there, but that's over now. Not that you're old, but you're not a young guy. You're not a rook anymore, man. Like it's time to start giving this team really quality minutes and understanding that, yes, firecracker mentality, be that guy, but within reason to stay healthy. That's the thing that Colin Sexton has to understand. And I think for the Jazz, he brings the most value off the bench because, again, it comes back to my original point about this team right now. Their inconsistency and pace of play is largely due to guys like Colin Sexton. It's largely due to Jordan Clarkson. Those guys playing all these minutes is why you're inconsistent. So if you get Scoot, if you get Thompson, and you teach them, hey, this is how we're going to run offense in Will Hardy's system, you should be much more consistent with how you go about it.
But it's also why I think... Again, I look at Brandon Miller. It's a knockdown shooter.
Yep.
That's a guy that think about Bojan Bogdanovic at his best on the wing as a knockdown shooter, right? Like he is that guy, but better for the Jazz, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have multiple options. I just think they're targeting point guard because it's been a hole in their arsenal, right? I mean, Mike Conley was a guy that was always hurt for this team in critical moments. And I think that when you had this recent high tide with, Don Rudy, Mike Conley, Bojan Bogdanovic, right? Like the one thing that you really, in my opinion, you truly missed was the identification of who the dude was.
Mm-hmm.
There was never like the best player on the team. The go-to guy was Mike Conley against Denver. No. Bojan Bogdanovic against Dallas. No. Rudy Gobert against Terrence Mann and the Clippers. No. Right?
Never.
Like it was not Don. It was not Mike. It was not Bojan. It was not Rudy. Right?
It was nobody.
So you tore it down. This is an opportunity to get a guy who could potentially be your dude. Right? Because right now, I think Lauri Markkanen's your best player on this team, and you haven't been able to identify the singular best player on this team. And a lot of people would tell you it's Donovan Mitchell, but that just never played itself out here. Never played itself, as much as I'm a Don guy, it never played itself out that he was the elite player that you always needed him to be because he wasn't. And you have a guy now in Lauri Markkanen on a playoff team. If that Lauri Markkanen that we saw for the Jazz last year is on a playoff team, good night, dude. And if you've got an Amen Thompson or a Scoot Henderson on the ball, allowing, these other guys that you're building, the Walker Kesslers, the Lauri Markkanen, whoever you wind up putting next to those two guys or between those two guys, your Amen Thompson, let's say, now you got three dudes who have the ability to get off the ball, go and get into their best position to find their spot on the floor to impact the offense.
Yep.
And I think that's what, obviously, with a ragtag bunch of dudes last year, that's what you missed was this cohesiveness. Going forward, you're not going to wonder where the hell Rudy Gay is. You're not going to, you're not going to wonder what's going on, this guy or that guy or.
Yeah.
You're just not going to have to worry about that. So I think this draft is incredibly important.
Well, and I think, again, the last point I would make is like, if you're one of the long times on this show, hardcore Jazz fan, you guys remember when we were having the conversations about them trading Rudy specifically and just how, painful and tumultuous of a time that was. And I think at that time I said, hey, 2 years from now, when you get all these picks and you have all this flexibility, you're going to be loving this moment. And now we're here at that time where you've got all this flexibility, you've got all these picks, and now it has to be, and I know it's corny, but it has to be in Danny we trust. And this is his time to shine. And I just think that that this team can be, last year they fell short of 40 wins. This team can be mid-40s this year, no problem, if you get it right in the draft. And that's the one area where I can say, out of every upgrade that happened, Danny Ainge is a massive upgrade over Dennis Lindsey, and I just think you can't undersell that.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about there's so much talent in the top 10 picks in this draft. Cam Whitmore, dude. The problem with Cam is he's very young. Ammon's 20. And I think when you look at like just looking at builds, like 6'7", 215 for Ammon Thompson.
Look at the size, bro. Like
20 years old. Cam Whitmore is 6'6", 235. He's 18. I mean, you're looking at a guy in Ammon Thompson. That's exciting. But good night with Cam Whitmore or Taylor Hendricks from UCF. Dude, 6'9", 215, and he's 19 years old.
Yeah.
Man, I'm an Ammon Thompson guy. Again, if you're a long time, I've been talking about him for months.
Mm-hmm.
Nate Davis, the Jazz Bull, try to keep Scoot or Cam Whitmore and then go after a power forward, or you can get Bradley Beal later in a trade. I think you would have. It's interesting. I had a conversation about Bradley Beal yesterday night.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't think that Bradley Beal is a guy that's going to be like, oh yeah, I want to go to another rebuilding team in Utah. Isn't Bradley Beal a little ahead of your arc here?
A little bit.
Right? And you're going to have to pay him a ton. He's got a full no trade. He's got a phenomenal agent in Mark Bartelstein.
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make a lot of sense for the Jazz. The Lakers, the Clippers, Golden State.
Contenders, bro.
Portland. Although, can you imagine Brandon Miller in Portland?
Yeah.
God, dog. Like, does his shooting translates, dude? Man.
Just needs development, dude.
His shooting.
2 seasons.
6'9", 210, 20 years old. Like, that kid's ready to play.
That's got wannabe Kevin Durant frame written all over it. Like, that's Kevin Durant's frame. 6'10", came in the league at, I want to say, 212.
Let's see. I think my biggest question about Brandon Miller is he Buddy Hield? Well, right now he is, because that dude's a knockdown shooter, but I don't know right now that he's capable of finishing at the rim in this league.
Yeah.
Which worries me a little bit, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So you have a little question mark there, but I don't know. I'm an Ammon Thompson guy. If I'm the Jazz, that's my dude. I think Scoot Henderson is going to be just unwieldy expensive. Like,
yeah,
dude, they're going to want the house and the cars for Scoot. And I don't know how much I'm willing to give up for him. Let's run through some of your comments here on the Monty Show, presented by our good friends at Bucked Up Energy, the official energy provider of the Monty Show. You guys, I'm telling you, if you have not shopped the Bucked Up sale today, buckedup.com, it is absolutely a treasure trove. Everything at buckedup.com today, 45% off right now. Use the promo code 45OFF. I saved $211 today. And I got things like greens, collagen peptides. I got 10 boxes of buckshot, watermelon buckshot. Got 10 boxes of it. I saved $211. Stock up today at buckedup.com. Use the promo code 45OFF at buckedup.com. It is their best sale day of the year. Hook it up right now because stuff is going fast. I saw a lot of people commenting that they went to buckedup.com. So, hey, man, I'm telling you, the sale is fantastic. Hook it up, buckedup.com. Monty owes a ribeye says, hopefully it's a fun summer for the NBA. Dude, we need it. Because last summer felt very serious around the NBA, whether it was the Lakers or the Jazz burning it to the ground or... Well,
this summer's going to get real serious for Ja Morant because that's coming down too, and everyone's forgotten about it.
I think Ja Morant's a big storyline. I think the guys on ESPN this morning were talking about how a Friday news dump seems appropriate. You know what? I got to agree because you're not going to do it on the day the Nuggets have their championship parade.
No.
Right? You're not doing that. I think tomorrow, on a real quiet day, a week before the draft, John Morant's going to get a year-long suspension.
When is parade?
I mean, parade's today.
When is parade?
Nicola, parade's today.
I need to go home.
Well, after the parade today, you can go home.
No.
Well, okay. My point is, I'm telling you right now that I would guess Friday, because you're not going to suspend John Morant a significant amount of time. Whether it's 40 games or 82 games, you're not going to suspend him the week of the NBA draft, which is a week from today.
And it feels like waiting till after is a mistake.
You can't do it.
Can't do it,
because you've already met with him. John knows what his punishment is, right? Notice he's radio silent. He knows what his punishment is. You got to announce it. I think tomorrow's the day that it gets announced. Yeah. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Cowboy Country says, if I were the Spurs, I would not take Victor Wembanyama. He is way too skinny. He needs to put on 20, 30 pounds or he will be pushed around like a rag doll. He's 7'5" and only weighs 230. It's terrifying because imagine being the San Antonio Spurs, because I believe we all recognize they've had, well, what's good about him? What's bad about him? What do we like? What do we hate? Like, you're sitting around doing that, right? You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, because you can't let him play in Summer League.
Draft Express lists Buddy at 227.
And I think that's generous.
Yeah.
Take the rocks out of his pocket, dude. But you know what, Cowboy Country? I think you're right. For sure. Brady Cook, do we still try and go after a big name in free agency? I think you're going to have to trade. I think it's going to be difficult to, and I don't know that this is necessarily a great free agent class specific to the Jazz.
Yeah.
You're not going after James Harden, right?
I think that you have to get through the draft first. I think that, free agency and the buyout market and like these different things that happen after the draft, let those live after the draft. I think for this squad right now, the Jazz have had a tendency, not with this group, but the Dennis Lindsey era, to mess up the draft on a regular basis. And I think that chapter needs to be left behind now. But the only way to leave that behind is by executing in this draft. So to me, obviously you've got options. And I this is just conjecture, my opinion, but I have to think if you're Danny Ainge, Justin Zanuck, and Ryan Smith, you're sitting here saying, okay, we've got a plan A, which is to move up inside the top 5 and get the guy that we like, whoever that might be, whether that's Scoot or Ammon, depending on where you land. If that doesn't work out, or for whatever reason, if you couldn't move up, which I would be surprised, then we can start focusing on, hey, we're going to make some trades, or we're going to, do this or do that because we weren't able to get, where we wanted to be in the draft. So I just think free agency is too far out. I think that, you tongue-in-cheek about James Harden, but the league needs to see where James Harden's going to go. I mean, is this somebody who's going back to Houston? Well, there's this rumor being run out there about the Lakers, but grain of salt because it's the Lakers. It just feels kind of fabricated. Like, there's a lot there in the James Harden situation. And by the way, what in the hell are the Phoenix Suns going to do? Because I think that's the team that rocks the boat, if you will, the league based on where they trade these guys.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Because the league has gotten so much younger now.
Yeah.
The league in this draft is not going to change that.